Hey everyone, welcome to the fourth and hopefully the final recording for this tutorial. I'm Bharadwaj from Just 3D Things, and today I'm going to show you how I made these Woodsprites. This is what the scene is going to look like. This is our scene layout, and this is what the final render should look like. So let's just get into it. I'm going to open up a new scene, delete everything, close this tab here. I'm going to turn on my screencast key so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. And we're going to start off by going to front view and adding a path curve. You could use whichever one you want. Bezier works too, but I just prefer this. So I'm going to go to edit mode and sort of start making our shape. So I need this sort of S shape which starts at the origin. So I'm going to move my points around. Extrude this, place it here, extrude that. That should be fine. I'm just gonna spread this out a bit, and that should be good. The shape is entirely up to you, so you guys can just make whatever you want as long as it has this curvy shape to it. Alright, the next step is to add some dimension to this. So I'm gonna add two more curves, a bezier for the taper and a circle for the bevel. So I'm just going to move these to a side, and I'm going to create a new collection and put them there so that I can avoid some confusion later. So I'll select this, put them there. I'm going to rename this selection to sprites. Okay. Now I'm going to name this tentacles because I don't know what else to call them. So with this selected, I'm going to go to the geometry tab, and for bevel, I'm going to choose my circle. And for the taper, I'm going to choose my bezier curve. Okay, I'm going to scale my circle down so that these tentacles are thin. And let's start making the taper. So for that, I'm going to go to front view here. And with this bezier selected, I'm going to go to edit mode and make sure I have this sort of thin to thick transition on both sides. Alright. That should be fine. Make this middle a bit thinner. Okay, perfect. Next, I'm going to hide this collection and we are going to array our curve. So for that, I'm going to first add an empty plane axis and select my tentacle and add in an array modifier. I'm going to uncheck relative offset, choose object offset and select my empty. I'm going to give it a number of 14. A count of 14, and with my empty selected, I'm going to rotate it by 26 degrees about the z-axis because 360 by 14 is approximately 26. So that looks pretty fine already. For this middle portion, what I'm going to do is select my curve, duplicate these vertices, press P to convert them to a separate object, and with that new curve selected, I'm going to remove my taper and bevel and replace my array modifier with a screw modifier. So now we almost have our shape. So I'm going to go to edit mode and move this top vertex down so that it's aligned to our tentacles. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to add a subdivision surface modifier so that it's a little smoother. Okay, next for the middle portion, which is the teardrop shape, I'm going to add in a UV sphere. Go to edit mode, move this down a bit. And with my pivot point set to 3D cursor, I'm going to scale it above the z-axis a bit. And overall scale it down a tiny bit. Okay, I'm going to select my bottom vertex. And with proportional editing set to sharp, I'm going to move this down so that we have a nice and smooth teardrop shape. I'm going to press X to delete this. And with this bottom vertex, edge loop selected, I am going to create another teardrop shape connected to this one. So for that, I'm going to extrude, scale this out, extrude again. And hopefully the next one is the last one. And yeah, scale it down to 0. And that should be perfect. I'll give it some smooth shading And I'll add a few bevels here so that it's not too sharp. Let's scale this down a bit, add in a bevel, and I'm going to scale this one as well. Alright, that should be, yep, that's perfect. Next, for the wing, what I'm going to do is add another bezier curve, rotate it about the x-axis by 90, scale it up a bit, and move it along the x so that it coincides with the origin. Okay, now in edit mode, I'm going to move these points a bit so that I can get the shape that I want. Okay, now to add some dimension to these curves, this curve as well, I'm going to bring back the old one, duplicate them, hide the other two, and with the new bezier curve selected, again I'm going to choose the circle for the bevel object and the bezier for the taper object. I'm going to scale the circle down a bit, and I'm going to make this portion touching the origin a bit thinner. So I'm going to rotate that about the z-axis, and that should be fine. Alright, I'll hide these again. Now for the feathers which we had over here, I'm going to select this curve here, duplicate these two vertices, press P and convert them to a separate object. And the first thing I'm going to do is delete my array modifier. Oh shit, I'm going to select this, delete my array modifier, go to the geometry tab and remove my bevel and taper. But I'll add a tiny bit of depth here because we're going to use particle systems and we need some base for it to apply the particles. So in edit mode, I'm going to align this curve with the tentacle. So I'm going to subdivide that, move that there, and that should be fine. Just going to bring this down to 0.05. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think we're done with the modeling, so let's just get to the feathers. So the first step is to convert this to a mesh. So press F3, type in convert to mesh, and in the particles tab, I'm going to add a new particle system, set it to hair, bring down the length to 0.5. Yeah, 0.5 should be fine. And under render and viewport drop downs, I'm going to uncheck show emitter because I don't want that cylinder to be seen in the rendered view. Alright, next I'm going to press control tab, go to the particle edit mode, and I'm going to change this, edit these particles so that I have my desired shape. I'm probably going to throw in a time lapse here because this part is really boring and you guys probably don't want to see me suffering with this shape. Okay, that should be fine. The next step is to array this, and I actually tried using an array modifier and placing it above the particle system, but that didn't work out. So I resorted to a more primitive method, but if you guys know how to fix that, just do let me know in the comments. So what I did was duplicated it with Shift D, rotated about the z-axis by 26 degrees because we rotated this tentacle just by 26 degrees as well. And I need to do this 14 times, but since I did it once, I can just press Shift R and repeat that operation as many other times as I want. So those feathers are done, and next we need to add these same feathers to this wing as well. So with that curve selected, I'm going to press F3, convert to mesh. Under particle system, I'm basically going to do the same thing I did before. So I'm going to throw in another time lapse maybe. Okay, that should be fine. This part is entirely up to you, so you guys don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. So with the pivot point set to 3D cursor, I'm going to again duplicate this and rotate it about the z-axis by 90 because we need only 4 of them. So I'm going to press Shift R to repeat that 4 times. And with that, we're done with the modeling. So the next step, I'm just going to go to shading, set my render engine to cycles, GPU compute, and I'm going to go to rendered view, turn on my scene world so I can see what's happening. Just bring down the opacity so it's not too distracting. I'm going to start by making the material for my tentacles. So first I'm going to delete my principal bsdf, add in a layer weight node, plug that in through a color ramp. Okay, let's see how that looks. I'm gonna bring the blacks out a bit and I'll choose facing so that we have a smoother fall off over there. And yeah, that should be fine. I'm going to use this as my mask for my mix shader. Plug that in there. And for the inputs, I'm going to use a transparent bsdf and a glass bsdf. Okay, to color this glass, I'm going to duplicate these two. Bring this black back out. And for the color, I'm going to use a sort of light blue and pink. So the black selected, I'm going to choose light blue somewhere there. For this one, I'm going to give it a pink. And I think that looks good. But this part is entirely up to you. You can just do a lot of trial and error. So let's just bring that back. Yeah. Yep, this is perfect. Exactly what I was looking for. Now for the feathers, what I'm going to do is use the same material again, but I will rename this to, tentacles. Create a new one and rename this to feathers. And I'm going to replace my glass bsdf with an emission node. Emission. Plug that in there, plug in the color, and let's just see how that looks. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my scene world strength, bring in the blue out a bit, bring back this, and that looks fine. So I'm going to add this material to all the other tentacles. So I'm going to hide this first, select everything. So that's selected. I'm going to press Ctrl L and choose materials. Did that work? Yes, that worked. Okay, so now we're done making the base materials. And for the other two, I just end up reusing the same materials because we don't need to do anything else for that. So with these feathers selected, I'm going to choose the feather texture, the feather material. Choose that, Ctrl L, materials. That looks fine. And for this central ball, I'm going to add the same texture that I added for the tentacles. And that looks good already, but I want this transparent BSDF to have a greater effect than the glass. So I'm going to convert it to a new material, name it to center, and I'll just bring this back. Okay, so now we're done adding our materials, but I am just gonna edit it a little bit so it looks better. Okay, the next step is lighting and composition. So I'm going to start off by adding a camera. I'm going to press Ctrl Alt 0. I'm just going to move this around so that it looks, perfect. And this part is entirely up to you, but I just want this main sprite to be at the center and I want a few more at the sides. So for that, I'm just going to turn on composition guides first. And the one I use for this is golden triangle A. Okay, so instead of duplicating this entire thing over and over again, what I do is I add collection instances. So before that, I'm going to put my camera in a new collection, name it to miscellaneous, throw my camera in there, and I am going to add a collection instance. So Shift A, collection instance, sprite. I'm just going to hide this. So now we have this entire thing in a single collection and we can duplicate them and place them wherever we want. So I'm just going to split my viewport so that I can see what I'm doing more easily. So I want this center one tilted a bit here. Duplicate this. And I'm just going to move this one back a bit. Alright, perfect. And now I need to add another one on the left. So Shift D, duplicate that and place it right there. I'm going to rotate this and choose the pivot point to median point so that it's not too monotonous. Right, let's just see how that looks. And that looks pretty good. So next, let's just get into lighting, and this is pretty easy. I'm just gonna add an area lamp, move it up, scale this out a bit. I'll give it a strength of say 300 and choose a cyan color so that it goes with the rest of the color scheme. I want this to light up the side of my sprite, so I'm just gonna bring this here, rotate it so that the light falls on the sides of them. I'll just bring up the exposure for now so that I can see what I'm doing. So under exposure, I'll bring it to 0.2, maybe a little more. Alright, 3 seems fine. So I'm going to increase the strength to maybe 400. Add another lamp on this side, but I'll bring this a little closer. And I'm going to use these lights to light up these two as well. So these two selected, I'm going to duplicate them, place one above each of these duplicated sprites. So that goes there, this goes here, and that should be fine. I'll bring down my exposure to 0, and that looks pretty good. I'll just increase this strength so we can see at least a little bit of the sprites at the back. Okay, that should be fine. Next, I'm going to add that sort of starry effect which we had in the final render. So for that, I add a plane, rotate it about the x-axis, bring it back and scale it up so that it covers my entire camera. In the final render, what I did was I changed the color to sort of dark purple, brought up the strength to 0.1 so that we get a nice purple background instead of black, which I thought didn't look nice. So with the plane selected, I'm going to go back to the shader editor, add a new material, name it plane, and I'm going to add a voronoi texture. Plug that in through a color ramp. Let me just see how that looks by pressing Ctrl T. You can do that if you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. And I'll just bring the black out a bit, increase the strength to 10, maybe a little more. No, 10 is fine. Okay, so instead of white, I'm going to give it a sort of cyan color so that it goes with the color scheme. I'm going to use this as the input for the emission and the alpha. So let's see how that looks, and perfect. Alright, there we go. That looks pretty good already. Next, for rendering, I'm going to give it a render sample of 600, and in the render passes, I'm going to go denoising data. In the composition tab, I'm going to check use nodes, bring this out, add in a denoising node, and plug that into the noisy image, denoising normal, and the denoising albedo. And let's just give it a render. Okay, so as I started rendering this, I forgot that I didn't give a material for this center cone portion. So let's just go back to our shader editor, and with that cone selected, whoops, we have to do that in the original collection. So I'm just going to hide this, bring back my original sprite, and in the shader editor, I'm going to select this one, add in the same feather material, but I'm going to change it to a new material so that we can edit it a bit. So I'm going to rename it to cylinder, although it's not a cylinder, but I didn't know what else to call it. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to hide this again, bring back the other sprites. Okay, that looks perfect. God, that was stupid. Anyway, let's just give it a render and see how that looks. Alright, since that's done, let's go back to our compositing tab, and I'm gonna add a glare node and set it to fog glow. So let's see. Oh wait, before that I'm gonna add a viewer node. So Shift A S viewer, plug that in there as well, and let's see how that looks. Okay, now you see that that sort of bloom effect over there, and I think that looks pretty good. And with that, we're done with this tutorial. And as usual, I've uploaded this file to our Gumroad where you guys can get it for free. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.